Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission here is, well, it's simple. We take your stack of reading, all that deep research, and we pull out the most vital, actionable knowledge. We synthesize complexity into clarity.
And today, we are really undertaking a deep dive into an often, I'd say, misunderstood goal.
Absolutely. We're moving beyond that high energy, almost frantic pursuit of happiness to explore something more stable, more sustainable. We're talking about the powerful state of contentment.
That is the crucial shift, isn't it? And it's one that spans, millennia of thought and decades of modern psychological research.
Right.
So for you, the thoroughly informed learner, this isn't about, quick tips for being momentarily cheerful. It's about really understanding the fundamental architecture of inner peace.
And our sources for this dive, they cull from behavioral psychology, neuroscience, a lot of ancient philosophy.
And they all agree on one thing. Contentment is not a gift you just passively receive. It's a complex state you have to actively and consistently cultivate.
Through very specific mindset and lifestyle shifts. Okay, so let's unpack this right away. We absolutely have to clarify the distinction between happiness and contentment, because if you misuse these terms, you end up chasing the completely wrong thing.
Most people do. They think they're synonymous.
Yeah, but our sources show a monumental difference. Let's start with a really beautiful analogy that I think just grounds the entire discussion. Happiness is the weather.
And contentment is the climate. That analogy is, it's invaluable because it speaks directly to duration and intensity.
Tell us more about that.
Well, happiness is defined as short-term, it's intense, often fleeting. It's that high arousal, exciting reaction that's usually triggered by something external.
Like a successful presentation at work or buying something you've wanted for a while.
Right, or the rush of a vacation. It's the sunshine, the sudden storm, that temporary high-pressure system. It comes and it goes.
Exactly. You can feel that high arousal energy, in your body, maybe a flutter of excitement or exhilaration. But the emotional system, it's designed to return to baseline. So it fades.
But contentment. Contentment is the climate. It's stable, it's predictable, long-term. And it's defined as a low arousal state. We're talking serenity, equanimity, a deep inner peace.
And its source is primarily internal, right? It's about the quality of your perspective, not so much the external events happening around you.
Precisely. And that points to the most profound shift, which is in the focus of desire. Happiness is almost always associated with pursuing more.
More success, more stimulation, more validation.
The next big thing.
Yeah.
Always the next thing. Contentment, however, it demands a shift toward appreciating enough.
That might be the single most important definition we can offer here.
I think it is. Contentment is not the fulfillment of what you want, but the realization of how much you already have.
So we're moving away from this idea that peace is just some lucky byproduct of achievement. It sounds more like contentment is an active, intentional mindset.
It's a skill.
A skill that requires consistent practice. It's not something that just happens to you. It's something you construct day by day.
Exactly. So if we view contentment as the end result of, say, aligned values and practiced acceptance, then our mission today is to break down those foundational layers and the actionable mindset pillars that make that construction possible.
So where do we start?
We have to start at the very basics of survival and biology.
Okay, let's begin there at the very bottom, the necessary groundwork. If contentment is the stable internal climate you're aiming for, you absolutely need a secure foundation.
And our sources are, they're unanimous on this. It is almost impossible to feel content if your brain is stuck in survival mode.
You can't be serene when you're panicked.
You just can't. This is the baseline, the foundational layers. We're talking about meeting basic human needs, having enough food, stable shelter, personal safety, and just, rudimentary health.
When those core components are uncertain, what's happening in the brain?
The brain just defaults to high alert. It starts releasing stress hormones like cortisol. And serenity is simply aberrious. Yeah. It's physically unavailable when the body is constantly signaling danger. You can't meditate your way out of starvation anxiety.
Which leads us directly to the frequently debated and often oversimplified role of money.
Right.
We hear the cliche all the time, money can't buy happiness. And while that might be true for the high arousal, fleeting kind of happiness, our sources are very clear that having enough money is a critical foundation for contentment.
Yes, and we have to understand why that is. The primary value of financial security isn't about buying luxury goods. It's about acquiring autonomy and dramatically reducing that survival anxiety.
Financial stress is a relentless source of what you called inner friction.
It is. It constantly pulls you out of the present moment and into worrying about the future. But when you have sufficiency, You gain a measure of control over your time, your decisions, your immediate environment.
I think we need to really spend some time on the research threshold here because it's one of the most cited and I think most misunderstood data points in all the sources.
You're talking about the income plateau.
Yeah, the research that shows that wealth beyond a certain level rarely increases life satisfaction.
That threshold is consistently cited to fall somewhere between $75,000 and $100,000 a year. And of course, you have to adjust that for cost of living and where you are.
It's a really powerful insight.
It is, because once you hit that sufficiency point, the level where, rent is paid, food is on the table, medical bills are manageable, and you have a small buffer for emergencies, the contentment needle it plateaus.
So if you're earning 100,000, are you necessarily more content than someone earning, say, 200,000?
According to the data, usually not.
Why is that? What specific anxieties are removed between, let's say, $30,000 and $80,000 that allows contentment to flourish?
It's the elimination of those unpredictable, high-stakes stressors. Below that threshold, every unexpected expense, a car repair, a dental emergency, it can feel catastrophic.
It could threaten your housing or your health.
Exactly. Yeah. But once you cross that line, those events become, they become manageable administrative issues, not existential threats. And the emotional value of the extra $100,000 above that benchmark is minimal because the core fears have already been neutralized.
So chasing excess wealth beyond sufficiency is really just chasing that fleeting dopamine-driven high of consumption. It's not about the serenity of contentment.
You're just back on the hedonic treadmill. The contentment framework really demands that we stop confusing our needs with these manufactured desires that are designed to keep that treadmill turning.
And once that stability is achieved, the marginal returns on more money for inner peace become negligible. It might even add new stressors, like managing it all.
That's right. But the financial layer is only half of the foundation. Yeah. I mean, you could be a billionaire, but if your body is in constant disarray, contentment is still out of reach.
Which brings us to the biological substrate.
Exactly. Contentment is fundamentally tied to our physical state.
And we often treat things like sleep and nutrition as, optional add-ons, but our sources frame them as non-negotiable prerequisites for emotional stability.
And they absolutely are. Our physical state regulates the crucial neurotransmitters that allow the brain to even register a sense of safety and calm. We have to ensure adequate sleep, sufficient movement, and proper nutrition.
These aren't just things that make you feel good.
No, they directly dictate our emotional resilience.
Can you break down that neurochemical connection a bit? How does a lack of sleep, for instance, actively block contentment?
Well, think about the balance of serotonin and dopamine. Dopamine is often the chasing chemical, the reward for seeking something new. Serotonin is more closely associated with feelings of well-being, calm, and sufficiency.
Okay.
Chronic fatigue or poor nutrition disrupts the delicate balance of these systems. If you're sleep-deprived, your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that's responsible for emotional regulation and wise decision-making, is compromised.
So you become more reactive.
You become hypersensitive to stress, you struggle to process minor setbacks, and you find it nearly impossible to achieve that low-arousal, serene state we're defining as contentment.
So if the body is chronically stressed or deficient or tired, the physical apparatus for feeling peaceful is just not operational. It's a physiological barrier.
Precisely. And the sources also strongly emphasize physical grounding. They specifically cite the value of spending time in nature.
This isn't just about relaxation, is it?
No, it actually helps reset the nervous system. Exposure to natural, simplified environments can dramatically reduce cortisol levels and quiet the mind. It makes it easier to step back from all that internal noise and cultivate emotional resilience.
So once that groundwork of financial security, safety, and physical health is firmly laid, then we can move up to building the actual architecture of contentment.
Then we can start building the mindset pillars.
Okay, so let's move inward and start building those pillars. Assuming the physical and financial baseline is covered, contentment becomes a purely internal, almost philosophical process.
Right, and the sources describe this as cultivating inner order.
Inner order, what does that mean? Exactly.
Inner order is the state where contentment can thrive because it reduces what we call inner friction. This friction is a silent, often unrecognized source of dissatisfaction. It arises when your values, your daily actions, and your expectations are out of alignment.
Can you give us a concrete example of that inner friction? Because I think a lot of people probably feel it without having a name for it.
Certainly. So imagine you deeply value time with your family. You say that connection is your highest priority. That's your value.
Right.
But you spend 14 hours a day answering work emails, and you're constantly checking your phone during dinner. Those are your actions. The resulting internal conflict, that discrepancy between who you claim to be and how you actually live, that creates a chronic, low-grade guilt and stress. That is inner friction.
That makes perfect sense. It's like a constant hum of cognitive dissonance.
Exactly. And contentment requires a ruthless alignment between what you say matters and what you actually do.
So if inner order is the goal, the first pillar that allows us to cultivate it is radical acceptance, releasing resistance.
Acceptance, in this context, is the ability to acknowledge the present reality, exactly as it is, without instantly layering judgment onto it.
We often confuse judgment with observation.
We do. Acceptance means recognizing that difficult emotions, setbacks, pain, they're temporary waves in the ocean of life. They're inevitable, not a personal punishment.
And the really profound psychological insight here, which our sources stress, is that the resistance to reality, that screaming thought in your head, it shouldn't be this way or I shouldn't feel this way, is almost always more painful than the reality itself.
There's a famous psychological equation that's often cited here. Suffering equals pain times resistance.
Suffering equals pain times resistance.
Yes. So if you can lower the resistance, you lower the suffering, even if the pain itself remains. If you broke your leg, the pain is real. But the suffering is generated by resisting the fact that you now have a broken leg and must adjust your life. Acceptance is simply allowing the truth of the present moment to exist.
But we absolutely have to clarify this. Acceptance is not resignation. That is a trap a lot of people fall into.
It is a critical distinction. It's the difference between acknowledging where you are and liking where you are.
Right.
Acceptance means accepting what cannot be changed right now. The past, other people's choices, the current economic climate, while you simultaneously continue to act wisely where change is possible.
So if you don't accept the starting point, you're just paralyzed fighting the truth.
And you can't plan an effective journey forward. If you accept that your business failed, that's a painful reality, you are then free to learn from it and rebuild. That's wise action.
Okay, that makes sense. Moving on to the second pillar. Gratitude as the anti-comparison tool. The sources make a really strong statement here. Contentment is the enemy of comparison.
It absolutely is. And comparison is the primary fuel for the hedonic treadmill.
Right, that relentless cycle where we achieve something, a promotion, a new car, we get a momentary high, a blip of happiness.
But then our internal baseline just recalibrates. It normalizes the achievement, and we immediately start desiring the next thing. We never stay satisfied because the target just keeps moving.
We've all felt this. You want a specific new phone for months, you finally get it, and within a week, it's just a phone. The thrill is gone. How does gratitude actively interrupt that chase?
It shifts our neurological focus. The hedonic treadmill forces your attention onto what is lacking, the gap between where you are and where you think you should be. Gratitude is a deliberate daily practice that redirects your attention to what is sufficient, what is abundant, what is already working.
So by regularly acknowledging what you have, even small things.
Yes, like clean water, a safe bed, your health. You strengthen deep, sustained satisfaction, and you chemically reduce that urge for more that drives the treadmill.
I have to pause here and maybe play devil's advocate a little. Isn't this just a form of, toxic positivity, just ignoring real problems?
That's a fair question, but I think it misses the mechanism. It's not about ignoring problems, it's about choosing where you place your attentional resources.
Okay.
Our minds are wired to seek threats and lacks. It's a very old survival mechanism. Modern life just amplifies that surge into chronic dissatisfaction. Gratitude is the conscious, intentional rewiring of that system toward noticing the positive stability that's already present.
Which then gives you the emotional reserve to actually deal with the real problems when they do arise.
Exactly. It's a tool for resilience, not for denial.
And speaking of wiring, we have to talk about the modern social trap. We are constantly measuring our raw, messy, behind-the-scenes reality against the highly curated, airbrushed highlight reel of everyone else online.
And that social comparison is profoundly corrosive to contentment. It triggers that lack-based thinking instantly.
Because contentment is defined by that feeling of enoughness.
And you can never achieve enoughness if you are constantly viewing your life through the lens of external and often fictional perfection. Contentment requires you to focus on your own path and really limit the external metrics you use to judge your own worth.
Which leads us directly into the third pillar, self-acceptance and kindness. If we succeed in stopping the comparison to others, we also have to stop constantly comparing ourselves to some idealized, perfect, impossible version of ourselves.
This is a massive finding in contemporary self-compassion research. And the studies consistently show that individuals who practice self-kindness, who treat themselves as they would treat a dear friend, facing the same struggle, report significantly higher life satisfaction.
Higher satisfaction, more happiness, and reduced anxiety compared to those driven by harsh perfectionism.
And relentless self-criticism.
Yes,
Why is that difference so significant?
because perfectionism is built on fear. It's the fear of not being good enough, which forces you into chronic overstriving. Self-acceptance, on the other hand, is built on trust and resilience.
It's about fostering self-respect, living in a way you respect, even if you make mistakes. When you view mistakes as learning opportunities instead of moral failings, you cultivate inner stability. That internal alignment, that inner order and self-trust. It provides far greater resilience against life's inevitable setbacks than any external achievement ever could.
So far, we've established the stable foundations and the internal alignment required for contentment. But, when we look at the broader human experience, it's easy to think this means just retreating into oneself.
That's a common misconception.
But our sources make it very clear that genuine contentment is profoundly relational and purpose-driven.
Absolutely. Humans are fundamentally social creatures. And loneliness. Loneliness actively and severely corrodes contentment. You can have all the financial stability and master all the mindset pillars, but if you lack connection, that stability will just erode.
Which brings us to the gold standard of social research, the Harvard study of adult development.
A truly legendary study, spanning over 80 years, tracking the lives of hundreds of individuals from their teens all the way into old age.
And what was the single most important takeaway from all that data regarding long-term contentment?
The conclusion is just. It's overwhelming, and it bears repeating. Strong, warm relationships are the single most important predictor of long-term health, happiness, and contentment.
More important than wealth, social class.
IQ, more important than all of them. The study even found that strong relationships protected people against physical decline. Those who felt more connected had less midlife memory decline, lower rates of diabetes, reduced inflammatory markers in their blood.
So relationships aren't just a psychological boost. They're a biological necessity. They literally buffer us against the physical effects of stress.
Exactly. But, and this is crucial, it's about quality over quantity. The study showed that being in a lonely, superficial relationship was just as damaging as being completely alone.
So it's not about having hundreds of friends online.
Not at all. What truly matters are a few relationships built on vulnerability, deep trust, empathy, and mutual support. These are the bonds that allow you to feel truly seen and create that indispensable sense of belonging. Superficial connections or even toxic conflict relationships, they simply do not provide that stabilizing element.
Okay, so from connection to contribution, the next layer is purpose and meaningful effort. And this is a fascinating paradox because contentment is not achieved through comfort or idleness alone.
No, in fact, prolonged idleness often leads to restlessness and dissatisfaction. We need to feel that what we do matters.
A sense of purpose.
A sense that we are working towards something meaningful. And that's necessary for deep satisfaction. This meaning doesn't need to be some grand global career. It can be found in creative pursuits, in service work, or simply being the primary caregiver for one's family. The goal is contribution beyond yourself.
It sounds like we're hardwired for output, not just intake.
We are. When you engage in acts of kindness or work toward a cause larger than your own personal comfort, you foster a sense of interconnectedness, which feeds directly back into your sense of purpose and belonging.
And this concept is ancient. It leads us right to the Greek ideal of eudaimonia.
Eudaimonia, yes. A term we hear a lot, but is often mistranslated as just simple happiness or pleasure.
But it's much richer than that.
Far richer. It's rooted in Aristotle's virtue ethics, and it roughly translates to flourishing or living well. It's the contentment found not through passive pleasure, that's hedonia, but through personal growth, acting virtuously, and living out one's highest potential, your demon.
So if hedonia is the quick, fleeting high from, say, eating ice cream or going to a party,
then eudaimonia is the deep, lasting satisfaction that comes after you complete a marathon or master a challenging skill.
That's the perfect distinction. Eudaimonia requires effort and discipline, but the satisfaction it yields is intrinsic and sustainable.
And a major psychological pathway to this kind of flourishing is the experience of flow states.
Right. This is the concept from Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, being in the zone.
Exactly. Flow is that mental state where you are so intensely engaged in an activity that time just seems to disappear. The activity has to be challenging, but still achievable. It constantly demands the full stretch of your competence.
Whether it's complex coding, or painting, or rock climbing, or deep intellectual work.
Yes, that state of absorption fosters a profound sense of mastery. And this intrinsic satisfaction, derived from meaningful effort and growth, creates a deeper, more sustainable peace than external rewards ever could. The effort required for flow is what prevents contentment from becoming stagnation.
As we transition into the philosophical anchors, it's just so clear that the modern psychological research we've been talking about is, in many ways, just rediscovering truths that ancient civilizations arrived at thousands of years ago.
It's a powerful testament to the enduring human search for peace, isn't it? That these different traditions, separated by culture and time, they all converge on the same core principle. That contentment arises from internal practices and the conscious limitation of desire.
So let's start with Stoicism, which is having a huge revival right now. Their approach is one of disciplined, active acceptance. How do they define the path to contentment?
For the Stoics, contentment, or ataraxia, inner tranquility, is achieved by rigorously focusing your attention only on what is within your control.
Your thoughts, your judgments, your actions.
Then accepting everything else as external and, well, indifferent. This is the famous dichotomy of control. Destructive emotions like dissatisfaction or discontentment arise when we try to control the uncontrollable.
That sounds incredibly liberating, but also very difficult to practice. I mean, if I'm stuck in traffic, my judgment tells me I'm going to be late and I'm frustrated. The Stoic approach says I have to accept the traffic as external and only control my reaction to it.
You've nailed the mechanism. The Stoic practices are designed to help you transcend those destructive emotions by constantly challenging your internal narratives. The traffic itself isn't bad. Your judgment that the traffic is bad for you is the source of the upset.
So by anchoring your focus on your internal response, Stoicism provides a roadmap for equanimity, regardless of the external turmoil.
And we noted that gratitude is a core Stoic practice, which links it right back to the psychological pillar we discussed earlier.
Right.
It's essential for them. They use practices like the view from above, where you contextualize your small problems against the vastness of the cosmos, or the premeditatio malorum.
The premeditation of evils.
Yes, actively contemplating potential loss or suffering. Not to dwell on it, but to inoculate yourself against shock and to increase your appreciation for the current absence of that suffering. This actively fosters stability and appreciation for what you have right now.
Okay, let's pivot to the Epicureans. They also aimed for tranquility, but their method often gets confused with modern hedonism, which is really the opposite of contentment.
That confusion is severe, and it's a real shame. Epicureanism is the antithesis of luxury and excess. Epicurus defined the good life not as the pursuit of maximal pleasure, but as freedom from pain and mental disturbance.
And that's achieved through modest desires and simple natural pleasures.
Yes. Their core pursuit was aponia, the absence of physical pain, and ataraxia, the absence of mental disturbance.
So what kinds of pleasures did they advocate for, and which did they warn against?
They classified desires into 3 categories. First, natural and necessary. This is food, shelter, friendship. These are easy to satisfy and they lead to contentment.
Oh.
Second, natural but unnecessary. Gourmet food, luxurious clothing. These are harder to satisfy and they introduce dependency. And third, unnatural and unnecessary. Fame, power, massive wealth. These are impossible to satisfy and they always create disturbance.
That provides a crystal clear guide for intentional living, so a simple meal with friends.
Natural and necessary. It's highly valuable because it satisfies a need without creating dependency. A massive feast with extravagant wine, that's natural but unnecessary.
Yeah.
Creates dependency and the potential for regret.
So they stress that sustainable pleasures must not create dependency or produce long-term regret, physical or emotional.
Exactly. It circles back perfectly to our definition of contentment as low arousal and serene. The quiet evening with friends is far superior to the intense, expensive thrill that leaves you financially stressed or emotionally depleted the next day.
Now let's bring in the unique perspective of Arthur Schopenhauer. His philosophy often sounds pessimistic, focusing on suffering and the restless will. Where does he find contentment in that framework?
Schopenhauer offers a profoundly realistic, if challenging, approach. He views life as a constant, restless striving, driven by what he called the will, an irrational force.
Because desire is constant, he argued that pure static happiness, a perfect state, is impossible.
Right. Instead, happiness is defined as a state of semi-satisfaction that occurs only in the brief, fleeting interval between the end of one desire and the beginning of the next.
That is a fascinating counterpoint. So contentment isn't an achievement, it's a momentary pause in the striving.
Exactly. And his approach to appreciating the present is by reflecting on past sufferings. By acknowledging the adversity you've overcome, you appreciate the current, imperfect peace you inhabit. The absence of great pain becomes a profound, positive gain, not just a neutral baseline.
He famously said, "We do not notice the three-fourths of our being that is well, but dwell constantly upon the one-fourth that is ill."
And that changes the calculus entirely. If I view today, which is merely stable and peaceful, against the backdrop of a past crisis, then the stable day becomes a deeply cherished state. It allows for contentment amidst the flux and imperfection of life.
Which reinforces the necessity of acceptance, not just of current limitations, but of the very nature of human existence as an imperfect, striving journey.
And this philosophical wisdom links back beautifully to someone like Benjamin Franklin, who was a practical philosopher in his own right. His quote, "Contentment makes poor men rich," just summarizes the Epicurean idea perfectly.
Internal perspective, limiting desires, is the real currency of sufficiency.
If you need less, you already have more.
It's one thing to understand these philosophical frameworks and the psychological underpinnings, but for you, our listener, the key is integration. How do we take these deep insights and turn them into, contentment as a daily practice? What do we do tomorrow?
We have to shift the identity of contentment from being a final destination to being a daily discipline. And the most essential discipline, which is supported by both Stoicism and modern psychology, is the mastery of attention.
Our sources really emphasize this. Where your attention goes, your experience follows. If your attention is scattered, your life feels chaotic.
If your attention is constantly being hijacked by comparison, by endless news cycles, digital stimulation, future anxiety, your internal peace will be continuously disrupted. Contentment requires stabilizing your attention, making it resilient to distraction.
It's about training your mind to stay anchored in the present moment, which, as we've established, is the only place contentment can actually exist.
Exactly.
So what specific activities help us rebuild that attentional muscle?
We're talking about activities that demand deep focus. This means carving out time for deep reading, for focused work that engages your flow state, or for structured meditative practices. When you engage in high-quality focus, you're teaching your mind where to rest, preventing it from drifting into regret about the past or worry about the future.
You're literally strengthening your cognitive control.
You are.
Let's move to some highly actionable daily rituals someone can integrate immediately, starting with the first minutes of their day.
Start simple. Before the demands of the day hijack your focus. The practice of starting your morning by focusing on 3 things you are genuinely grateful for, whether you journal them or just do a simple mental reflection, is an intentional shift.
From lack to abundance.
It sets the baseline frequency for the day towards sufficiency, not scarcity.
And speaking of meditative practices, let's elaborate on those internal observation techniques like mindful breathing or vipassana.
These practices, especially Vipassana, are so powerful because they teach equanimity, mental calmness, stability, especially in difficult situations. And the mechanism is simple, but profound. You observe your thoughts, your emotions, your physical sensations, but non-judgmentally.
You see them as transient phenomena like clouds passing in the sky.
Not as permanent features of your identity, yes.
And that directly reduces the psychological pain of resistance we talked about earlier. If I view my anxiety not as I'm anxious, but as I'm observing a feeling of anxiety, the feeling becomes less threatening.
Absolutely. It creates space between the stimulus and your reaction. The thought or emotion still arrives, but you don't instantly identify with it or feel compelled to act on it. This non-judgmental observation is the engine of equanimity. It makes your internal climate more stable.
Another extremely practical step is managing expectations and goals. We're often driven by these massive, unrealistic goals that just lead to constant disappointment.
The sources recommend setting one realistic daily goal. This could be finishing a specific task, having a meaningful conversation, or completing a workout. Focusing on one achievable action fosters steady, predictable fulfillment.
You're using the power of small daily wins to build self-trust and satisfaction.
And you prevent the cycle of self-criticism that comes from constantly failing to meet overwhelming expectations.
It's momentum over perfection.
We also have to practice savoring ordinary moments. Contentment doesn't live in grand gestures, it lives in noticing. That comfortable silence, the quality of your morning coffee, the smell of rain, a task done well. These are all opportunities to anchor appreciation. Savoring means fully inhabiting and being present for these small, positive anchors.
And we can't talk about daily practice without revisiting the greatest modern enemy of contentment, the comparison trap.
Intentionally limiting your social media scrolling is a non-negotiable protection of your peace. It is direct consumption of corrosive comparison.
So if you reduce the time you spend measuring your internal life against curated external highlights,
You naturally lower the bar of what you feel you should have or be, which directly supports that feeling of inner sufficiency. It's just boundary setting for your mind.
finally, let's wrap this practical section with intentional living. Contentment seems to be a byproduct of living deliberately.
It truly is. This means aligning your daily actions with your true values and setting clear, firm boundaries to protect your time and energy from excessive external demands. Simplifying your life, reducing physical clutter, digital distractions, draining commitments, it creates the necessary space, the psychological quiet, for peace to settle in. Contentment is built on living intentionally, not surviving reactively.
We have covered so much ground in this deep dive, from the necessary financial safety net and the role of neurochemistry to the profound wisdom of the Stoics and the practical steps for stabilizing attention.
To synthesize the core ingredients for sustainable contentment, I think we have to remember it's an inner order built on constant vigilance in four pillars: the radical acceptance of impermanence, the cultivation of deep, high-quality connection, the commitment to meaningful, growth-oriented effort, and the daily practice of inner sufficiency.
It's that stable internal climate that remains resilient, allowing us to navigate the turbulent external weather without capsizing.
Yes, contentment requires clarity, chosen restraint, and intentional simplicity. It's the stable satisfaction that arises when your desire is proportionate, your attention is steady, your effort is meaningful, and reality is accepted without bitterness.
And the key, as we found in all the sources, is that it must be active.
It has to be.
What stands out to you as the deepest paradox we covered today?
For me, it's the deep paradox that contentment is not the ultimate comfort. It is the product of continuous, meaningful effort, that commitment to eudaimonia. If we confuse contentment with idleness, we invite stagnation, and that is the fastest way to erode inner peace.
True contentment is dynamic. It requires growth and virtue, not just a static resting place.
Exactly.
That is a profound distinction. So here is a final provocative thought for you to carry with you as you integrate these insights into your week. If contentment is fundamentally defined as realizing how much you already have, what is one major thing you are currently chasing in time, energy, or money that you could instead spend that energy appreciating and anchoring into your present life?
Or, to put it another way, where are you currently fighting reality, resisting what cannot be changed right now? And what happens to your peace when you simply decide to accept that starting point and choose wise action instead of resistance?
That's it for this deep dive into the architecture of contentment. Thank you for joining us on this journey to a more stable, centered way of living. We'll see you next time.